Hello one, hello all, it is the most hottest ghost of them all, Caspa in the flesh, and it's time for a review of Young Thug. Business is business. Young Thug is a Atlanta rapper, and he is back, sort of. This is a compilation album. Now, you were probably expecting to hear a bunch of up-to-date thoughts and bars from Young Thug regarding the RICO case, but unfortunately you only hear so much of that. But in my honest opinion, it's probably best not to talk about that, or at least not in depth, or say some feelings regarding it, but not to a point where it gets you in more hot water than you need to be. And I certainly give him credit for being so consistent with his discography in terms of releases. It feels like every 2 years we get a new album from Young Thug, and he's been able to keep that up. Now, are these tracks great unreleased tracks? Are these tracks great B-sides from what was left on the cutting room floor? Sometimes, but most of the time, not really. I feel like we're getting what could have been great albums that were left off of albums like Punk, albums like Slime Language 2, and the rest is just really mild throwaways that should have been left on the cutting room floor, but they're like, hey, we need to put out an album, so let's give you a bunch of tracks where we don't really care, we just want the streams, because you gotta get an album out there, you gotta be relevant. And it's taken a blow artistically, but that's not to say that this thing doesn't have highlights. It does. There are some diamonds in the rough on here, but the rest seems to be fool's gold. But let's get into the diamonds in the rough that are on this compilation, such as Money on the Dresser, which has like these off-the-wall organ chords, very angular with a trap beat, and Young Thug just sounds completely zany, completely out of his mind on here. Probably the most unhinged and probably the most off-kilter track on here in a good way. And doing what I love that Thugga does, using his voice as a eccentric instrument, because I do feel he has a great voice, because I do feel like his vocals are great when used in a intricate artistic way, and he is definitely doing that on here. Cars Bring Me Out has like this mandolin intro. It sounds really beautiful, and the rest is pretty much like a mafioso style instrumental where Thug is just going off on this vocally. Future lends a hand in here, pretty much his verse goes off without a hitch. But the selling point here for me, not only is the mafioso style instrumentation, but how charismatic and how unhinged Thugga sounds on the back end of this thing. It's like we're getting the old Thugga back just a little bit, but not enough. And the track Abracadabra, we gotta touch on this one because they mention Yours Truly. I'm joking, they don't mention Yours Truly. I posted that on social media because they use the name Caspa. No, they're not talking about me, they're talking about the friendly ghost. He's not there. But with Abracadabra, probably the most catchiest song on here, at least it caught my ear. Abracadabra, all these jewels can't see me like I'm Caspa. Like, it's just so animated, it's so over the top, and I love it. And also we get very atmospheric vocals from Travis Scott, along with these very elongated vocals from Young Thug, and a point where he's screaming into the atmosphere, but it definitely adds more to the track, and I love it. I wish there was more tracks on here like this, but we will get into the missteps as this review goes on. The song Oh You Went has this nice trap beat, these very elegant strings, very lavish, very rich when it comes to the instrumentation here, and very soulful vocal samples where Young Thug is just taking these eccentric glow-up, eccentric flexing bars to like the next level. One bar that really caught my attention was, oh you went top off, oh you went Flintstone, you took the rollie off, you went Big Stones. See, it's just like these eccentric bars that have humor, accompanied by Young Thug's very eccentric, very over-the-top, very animated vocals that just makes Young Thug style work when there's consistency. The song Jonesboro, which probably the most compelling track on here, with these dramatic piano leads and strings, these very forlorn and very like heartfelt hums that are in the background, and these eccentric charismatic vocals from Young Thug on here, like all throughout. And there are some bars on here where there is a misinterpretation of a Gunna diss on here, but due to the fact that this song has been on the floor for a long time, and due to the fact that these aren't new tracks, this is not a Gunna diss, contrary to what people may believe on here. Because there are bars on here in the context of snitching, in the context of no one feeling this person, and like, there are people feeling Gunna. There are. Not me, but there are people. And that's not the only misinterpreted dig on here. There's actually a misinterpreted diss to rapper Saweetie, where Gunna mentions someone named Sweetie, but not Saweetie, and the fact that this track is 6 years old, and it was just a big misinterpretation on the track They Want Me Dead. So those rumors are debunked, and unfortunately those are the only highlights I could point out here. The rest is pretty much really bland and a lot of artistic missteps, unfortunately, because we get weak production choices. There are vocals here that leave a lot to be desired. Like, went through it where they have like these repetitious vocoder vocals. It's like so ambient but yet so flavorless. It very much sounds like a leftover from punk that should have been kept in the refrigerator and then thrown into the trash right after. And I get that this is a bunch of tracks that were left out, but you could have put more highlights on here. I'm sure there's more highlights that would have been more satisfying to the ear on here, but they just chose not to. Now, there is a smidge of addressing the incarceration situation on here, like the opener, Parade on Cleveland, where I'm listening and I'm like, why is Drake rapping from Young Thug's perspective on here, saying bars that only pertain to Thug? I'm like, Drake's not incarcerated, last time I checked. But also in the midst of this track, you get Drake communicating with Young Thug over a prison call, talking about how Young Thug is pushing Peters, and by Peters, I'm pretty sure he means years, doing time. But then we get this very moody, very atmospheric beat switch, and I just wish these bars were more clever. Unfortunately, they fall pretty flat when it comes to humor, when it comes to wit. But I will admit the hook is pretty catchy. Business, 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 business. It's not a very well-crafted song. I do feel this song is all over the place and not the strongest intro to the album. And when it comes to the vocals on some spots, as I alluded to earlier, the song Mad Dog, where Young Thug has a absolute disconnect for melody and the instrumentation. Like, he is so not in the pocket here. The song Uncle M could have been a banger, could have been great, but the vocal chanted samples that are in the sample are pretty much drowned out by these really generic horns and the rest of the instrumentation. Like, unfortunately, he does not do this sample justice at all. And honestly, it just sounds so phoned in. It sounds like I'm living in a bad alternate universe and Young Thug got a hold of Get 'Em Girls before Cameron did. It would be a horrible time. Also, there are posse cuts and collabs on here that really pale in comparison to the collabs and posse cuts on Slime Language 2, unfortunately. Like, the production's pretty stale for the most part, the hooks aren't very memorable, there's really no standout bars. It just should have been, again, cut. And honestly, I feel it should have ended at Jonesboro. But I will say this, if it was just an EP of the highlights that I mentioned, this could have been a great set of tracks. Now, I just wish in the future that we could get tracks that are at Young Thug's best instead of just being thrown out into the universe. But yeah, I mean, that's not to say that there weren't moments that impressed me. There were. It's just not enough to have me go back to this thing, honestly. I'm feeling a 2.5 out of 5 on this album. If you've given this a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And let me know in the comments why you hated it, why you loved it. Let me know. Caspa got the ghost, free YSL, Young Thug, business is business, till we meet again.